welcome back to Cast Me to Hell with me, Seb.
And me, Father Robbie. I thought I'd mix it up because we always say the same thing and it's relevant for the film. You know?
It absolutely is. The fathers are in. We are back and we are following our review of The Exorcist Believer, the very highly divisive, actually divisive I guess is 50-50. This is more like highly shit to most people.
Highly shit.
But we loved it. We are back with the original Exorcist.
Yeah, which I think we were supposed to do before we watched the Believer.
We normally try to do the original, then we'll talk about the new one, so that when we're comparing it, we don't have to do that. But we did quite a lot of comparison of what we knew in that episode. So I think more of this one is going to be The Exorcist itself. We're focusing on the original film.
The original.
We might throw in a couple of little bits. But
yeah, we might do, because
we have no structure. We'll just go off on a tangent and we might end up talking about David Gordon Green for about 20 minutes.
We may do.
Before we come back and realise that it has nothing to do with The Exorcist anymore.
Yeah, or potentially something else, which keys into my little factoid I was teasing you with. And if you want to hear that factoid, then stick around. And remember to hit that subscribe button. And please leave us a lovely review. I've got to get that, I've got to get that in there. The power of Christ compels you to hit the subscribe button and leave us a lovely review. So this is the first time I've watched The Exorcist in about 15 years. I mean, I growing up, The Exorcist is heavily featured in things like scariest horror movie ever, best horror movie, it happened, it was real life, and
I passed out in the theatre,
I was shitting
this is
myself.
Banned, you're not allowed to watch it, and
I busted my nut in my pants, all that kind of stuff, but watching it reminded me, and it made me, I know we said we wouldn't really mention it, but it made me appreciate Believer a little bit more, because I think one thing with this film is everybody remembers the third act. Absolutely. And I think if you hadn't watched this film, I think you would think that the whole film takes place in the bedroom with the exorcism,
Everyone forgets that, literally, everyone remembers the ending, that third act, the main parts, the bits with the, the fathers and the whole of the exorcism that's happening, but I think I'd actually mentioned it in the previous episode, I forgot that the beginning of The Exorcist starts, in a completely different country, in quite a big, scene setting with a huge archaeological dig and, and more stuff about the demon Pazuzu and all that kind of stuff that I completely forgot even happened.
Same. I forgot there was a whole subplot with a detective in this.
The detective that appears in this, and then that's meant to be the same detective that is in The Exorcist 3, the much loved by many, not so interested by me. The film has so much more to it. It has many subplots. It has Chris McNeil has a whole part about her as both trying to balance her life as a somewhat celebrity actress while also being the person in this situation. You have the father who has a whole subplot about his mother and all of these kind of threads that we follow, and yet everyone mainly just remembers the bits when Regan is banging herself with a crucifix, or when she's twisting her head around, or when she's fucking up the room, or when she's throwing people downstairs. Those are the bits, and those are the kind of scary, mainly scary parts of the film. But there's so much more to this film. But if you came in with the idea that that's what the film's going to be, I can't imagine The Exorcist isn't going to be a letdown for you. That's the main thing that pops into my head. Anyone who's been told this is the scariest film ever, or this is the shocking, or it is shocking.
It is.
But and it is creepy, and it is oh fucking hell, and things like that.
Yeah.
But the same with Exorcist Believer. I'd say this one is definitely scarier.
Yeah, this is definitely it.
It's definitely scarier, but it's also not the film that people are expecting, and that was part of my thing back then, to get it out of the way. That was part of the thing that I was thinking about with Believer, was that I feel like a lot of people who were watching it maybe hadn't revisited the original that much, because I feel like they're idolising a part of the film without idolizing how the whole film plays out. I don't know.
And part of the effectiveness of that end part is the journey that the characters have taken to get there.
Yeah.
Like Father Damien Karras, I remember like there being a plot about him losing his faith. But I kind of forgot the part so much about his mother and about like the guilt he felt about leaving there. I forgot that he was also like a psychologist. I forgot that part.
Yeah, there's so much layer to it. And I remember actually in the last episode I missed because I called him Father Denning, which is a different character, which is Bert Denning, different character. But yeah, because I couldn't remember his full name, which is weird because he has quite actually a standout kind of name, Father Character.
He does, yeah.
But yeah, there is that whole part that plays out. And I feel like some people, if they like, if they can go with it, if they're expecting just your modern day possession film, then I feel like this is not. Like, this is why I think this is deemed as such a great film, and it's not mainly because of the possession stuff, to be honest.
No.
It's because of the build-up of the characters.
Yeah.
And that's the bit I found most interesting and most, that I wanted to explore more than actually, because it has a few shocking major scenes that stand out, yes.
Yeah.
But around that is a whole other 2 hours.
Yeah.
Or hour and 50 minutes or whatever. I can't remember exactly the timing. But, there is a lot. And if you break down the major, like, scary moments, it probably only accumulates to about 10 minutes of the film.
Yeah, it does. There is, like, such a slow pace to it. I do think, at least for me, there was a moment where I went from being like, okay, I forgot kind of how slow build this is. And then there was a real twist of like, oh shit, now like the creepy and the terrifying is beginning.
Yeah.
But we'll start at the start.
We'll start at the start.
It's a good place to start.
You were starting by talking about your
my factories.
15. No, I meant like, you've been 15 years, and I was pretty much the same.
Yeah,
like I remember having this on. I remember having this on DVD. And it was one of the early ones where you couldn't even fit whole parts of it onto it. So it was a two-sided disc where one side had the film on, the other side had the special features, and you had to like flip it back and forth to do it.
Yeah.
So it was an interesting early kind of DVD. Like it was one of the first. And I remember, I played this so much that I remember when I looked back when I ended up having to get rid of it. And I think I once took it into... Do you remember when you had to like take them into game and you could get them like...
Buffered
to try and see if you could fix it? And I think I remember them handing it back to me and saying, this is way too fucked. Like, I don't know what the hell I'd done to it, but I'd played it enough, which is so weird that I forget this stuff because... Again, like, I think I watched that Exorcist film so many times when I was probably like 9-10 years old. Child services.
Yeah, child services.
But I watched that so much. I literally, I don't know what I'd done to that disc. You'd think I'd fucked it.
You just went to town on it.
The power of Christ compelled me.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just completely bollocks by the time that I had to just throw it out because it was that fucked. When you get handed back The Exorcist by someone in it, like... We can not do anything.
We can't
to save this.
Yeah,
we can't save this soul. But yeah, so I remember loving it, and I remember. I think actually the only reason I watched it, in the first place, is not because of the aura around it, is because bloody Scream had talked about it in its opening with Billy in the bedroom. They talk about the Exorcist. There's a whole part with it about watching The Exorcist, and I got a fix on, and I was like, like that. That film helped me find lots of other horror films because of all of its references. But yeah, I definitely always thought that this was amazing. But I remember even back then people saying like, "Oh, I watched that and it was really boring and it was really slow and it was." And I get that with a lot of ones, but I don't know. I don't find this slow in the same way. When we've said recently, maybe with certain films where we're like, "This was a really like slog. This was slow."
Yeah.
This was trying to be. I think I made a dig at like A24, being like. There's slow because you're taking your time to build character, and then there's slow because you're talking about thematic bullshit that goes nowhere.
Yeah.
And this is the opposite. This is like each character kind of gets their own time to kind of build up.
Yeah.
Kind of like with the new one, but I'd say in the new one it's much more about the father, and there's maybe not as much with some of the others that get as much time. Whereas here, the father, the mother especially get enough that when it culminates together, it feels like I understand why this person's so affected by this possession.
Yeah.
Why the mother's so affected, but also why the father is suddenly so like getting agitated by what Pazuzu or Regan is doing back to kind of get to him.
Yeah, it's a real slow process, isn't it?
It is,
and it's great because like when we first see Regan's mum, Christy McNeil, whatever her name is, you see the father there as well. And you kind of know that they're in the same orbit, you know, they have like similar social circles. And it's only a matter of time until they're going to kind of, not collide, but they're going to come together, cross paths. And then Karras, who's already kind of losing his faith, is going to have it confronted by, you know, Christie's daughter, who is going through this thing that she has no answer for. But with the start
at the beginning, so
at the beginning,
I really like the opening scene because I forgot again because in my head The Exorcist was a small contained film.
Yes,
that's what I mean.
It's just a bedroom. It's nothing else.
That's what I mean, and
it's definitely not in Iraq or Iran.
That's what I mean. Yeah, don't start about Israel.
Yeah,
yeah. So that opening with Max von Snowden, and I was trying to find his name because I can't remember what his name. Merrin.
I just remember Merrin.
Yeah, with the whole the archaeological dig and like they've found something and they start burying inside and they find what to most of you just looks like you just pulled out a stone and then when you turn it you can see the face of something.
Yeah,
and he seems to have a more clear idea of what it is. But it doesn't all take place in that one day because then it's like as if he's been like
as if he's gone somewhere.
He's been researching it or finding out about it. So he's very interested. And yes, this opening part is like only a couple of minutes long, isn't it? But he is very invested suddenly, or as if he sees something in that when he sees that image on that rock, that artifact left behind. When he sees that face of Pazuzu, as we find out how it is, he is very like. It's like as if he's suddenly drawn into it as like one of those long-standing shots where he's like in his own mind.
when it's real quiet, isn't it? It's like, you have like the dig going on and stuff, but nobody's like, oh, it's the fucking face of Pazuzu, or nobody's saying like what it is, but you know that shit's gonna get bad. And then when they find the statue. Yeah, it's such a great part.
That's such a good set. So the dogs that are fighting as he walks up. But you're right about the sound again. Like something that I was thinking about because we'd mentioned it with the other one was the fact that yes, it has this like iconic score and stuff like that. But a lot of this film is actually quite quiet in the background as well. Yeah, so you can actually see where that's come from with the new one, which we thought were in the atmosphere. But there's something in this one about the lighting or the intensity that kind of like in that opening scene, like the sound of the digging, the sound when he goes out, and there is a rise in the score when the Pazuzu statue comes though. But like it's like you're hearing the noises. The noises are allowed to stand for themselves. Like the dogs fighting kind of comes out quite blaringly clearly, and he's like standing and staring, and then. It's a weird scene because it's kind of like a sunset or a sunrise, and like there it is right in front of him, this big like idol god, which I'm glad actually looks like practical effects though, because in a film like this though you could imagine where they kind of put like a shine around it and they kind of try to fit in an image, and that kind of would have ruined the look.
I don't know. I think because it's 73, isn't it? So I don't think they'd go for that. And it's not massive. It's like
no, but there's a lot of 70s film where they have like their special effects is like so we just place it on top of the image and we put like a little round. You know what I'm talking about?
I know
like
what
when they try to do something supernatural, so they put like a shiny like a bright circle around it so it stands out, and there it is, Pazuzu. But this is a much classier film than it's got Max von Snowden.
Yeah, it does have Max von Snowden.
Or sit down or whatever it is.
Yeah, they've aged him.
They have. That was one thing that was noticeable, that he is aged, because I was like I think he died a few years ago now. I think.
I'm not sure.
But he didn't look like that. Like he was in he was in the Star Wars the sequels. And like he
I can't remember what.
And he didn't even look that badly aged then. Yeah. And he was in like his 90s or something when he died. So, they made him look worse than he ever did. And that was slightly noticeable for me because I knew what he kind of looked like in old age. I was like, why do you look so old at such a... And then I was like, why is your face so pasty, like white and chalky?
I love the way you say that. That's pasty man.
Says the ginger man who's
yeah,
pasty
says the
white.
ginger man.
But that's because it looks like they've kind of... It looks like they've kind of
butter.
got like corn flour and just
It
like
does,
spread it over his face to make him look like his skin is like all gritty and
Yeah, it's
old.
real weird. And they've dyed his hair like white.
Yeah.
It's quite funny. But it's a great, it's a good opening scene.
It's effective because it kind of gives you a little bit of a, what is
Yeah.
this? And then obviously we just go over to Chris McNeil.
Yeah.
And we start their story.
We start theirs, which is, they move into this house and I can't remember exactly what she's doing. I think she's doing a new film or something like that.
Yeah. She's not the easiest of characters to warm to, I've got to be
No, I
honest.
think she's really shrill.
Yeah, she because she's an actress and stuff, but she doesn't seem that warm. So in those opening scenes and stuff, we do have nice moments with her and Regan that actually do alleviate it a bit. Because when she is, but sometimes it seems like she's kind of just pushing her off a bit, kind of thing. She's like, Maid can do that, and because I don't know if it's because she's meant to be like a star kind of thing, that she's got like maids and helpers around the house and stuff like that, and she's throwing that, like the iconic like fancy party that they get to, and she seems very much like, even during that, she seems a bit cold towards people. She's like going around at a party, but it's a bit like, I've invited you to my house, so this is my place.
This is mine.
I will stand by the piano as you play
to me.
I don't know if you had also. Do you have any part of you that reminded you from Scary Movie that kind of ruined a little bit of it for you?
Yeah, 2 parts.
2 parts.
The main 2 parts for me were the one where he starts playing Mystical. Shake your ass.
Yeah, that's what I mean. When they're around the piano and they're playing such a in the Exorcist, they're playing such a kind of thing that in my head I was like, when I watched it again, I was like, I didn't think that's the song they played.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking about it, I was like, oh, it's Shake Your Ass, and it was not in Exorcist, that was in Scary Movie.
Yeah, and then she comes down and she pisses loads.
Yeah.
And then the second was when they're doing the when they're doing the exorcism,
and it's Father Merrin.
And Father Merrin's like licking his tongue at her.
And then
he's like kissing her. It's so funny.
All those scenes, because to be fair, in Scary Movie 2, it is really well parodied with James Woods playing Father Merrin.
Yeah, James Woods, that's it.
And it has that whole scene, like the scene when Father Merrin is overwhelmed and goes into the bathroom to like basically consume himself or throw up or whatever he does like in there too. And in the film, he goes into the toilet to have like a massive shit. So he's got like the flies on his face, like in the original. But then he's like, the power of Christ,
Yeah.
And then also there's the whole with Father Karras, his version of that. He's even got is like when she says, "Your mother's with me," and then he's like, "Mum, will you get out of bed?" And like, I know it's such childish humour, but
it's class,
I couldn't help not what. Luckily, it didn't like completely ruin the effectiveness of it because I didn't remember the original clearly enough, I think.
Yeah.
But I couldn't help but, especially I think with the Father Merrin stuff with James Woods parts, I kept looking at it going. Even in that film, they parodied it well enough that the makeup in Scary Movie is like it.
It's
so
really
they've given James Woods like kind of crappy kind of again like whitish kind of, doesn't look like he's properly all just like makeup old.
Yeah, it's really funny.
But really funny. But that's what we've said it before about Scary Movie has a tendency. Any ones especially the first two anyway.
Yeah,
any ones they did in the first two when they did it so well, they kind of slightly ruin the effect at times of certain horror movies.
It's just in there.
Anything,
it just gets triggered.
Yeah. Exorcist, Scary, Scream. I Know What You Did Last Summer. All those ones that were parodied.
It's the main one for me. I Know What You Did Last Summer.
Yeah. That one because that one's probably the weakest of the three, like in terms of film. But it's got lines in it that are so easily parodied that when you watch the original, like, what are you waiting for? And scenes like that, you're just like, now I just can't take this film seriously at all.
Not for me. One thing I always forget about, because, again, The Exorcist being such a big and iconic film, and like we've said, a lot of people just focusing on that last third act.
Yeah.
I always forget about Captain Howdy and the Ouija board,
Oh yeah. I
forgot
about it again then.
Because that's probably like one of the other points. That's how Regan kind of lets the
demon through. Yeah.
Yeah,
but it is those little moments where you think, oh, this is such a a cliche way of being like, oh, they've done a Ouija board in order to get, or that Regan's got that in her bedroom as well, and you see it that she's obviously done it before as well, because when her mum comes in, she kind of like away from him and like, we're just having fun, we're just playing around with it. And it is hard, it is actually really hard not to now talk about this film and not talk about the new one, because in the new one, when you don't show it, but they're kind of doing a little like seance thing, and that was something that someone else picked up, saying that it was kind of a cliche that they're doing, like they do a little ritual, but it's like, but that's exactly not to be like, oh, they're copying the original, but how many ways can you really make it original to do that? You know what I mean?
And you don't just get randomly possessed.
No, you have to have a way to access it.
Let them in, don't you? You know?
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Tricky little buggers. They do that. They don't just like. It's not like they don't just slime people like Slimer, you know. They just go through you.
They have to be
invited
into this world.
Yeah,
but it's interesting to have little. But again, it doesn't. One of the good things, and this is again where I find a lot of modern supernatural films fall down.
Yeah,
is that they really focus on that bit of how they got possessed. They spend a long kind of
I've taken the lid off because it was getting behind the curtains. Coffee talk.
They spend a long time focusing on the Ouija board, or how they're going to get possessed, or what silly thing they're doing to get possessed. Whereas both for this one and the new one, in fact, although they do, it's only a moment to give you a hint of what it is. You don't see the whole thing play out. They don't go into it for too long. They kind of just do it, and then they kind of move past it, and it's not really the focal part.
And even then, what you find in a lot of modern horror films as well, when they do possession, is the person will play with it, the person will invite them in, and then there will be a scene where they get got, for lack of a better word. You know? Like if you think about... I watched this film recently called Talk to Me. I think you watched it.
Yeah, I watched it.
You know? And she... You know, they say, like... We won't give spoilers because it's a new film, but they say like you have to finish the ritual properly. She doesn't finish the ritual properly, but then we start to see it. You know, we start to see things seep into her life. Whereas, kind of in this, it's almost like comes in. We establish that she's already been doing it because she's like, I speak to somebody called Captain Howdy on it, which is a weird name for a demon to give itself. You know, and then which also brought up another question. I'll get into this after this point. But she does it. She says she's already established it. And then we don't really see anything coming for Regan. All we see is Regan kind of starts to deteriorate.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, again, so it is that it doesn't need to be all about like, there's something rushing towards you, or there's some big effect, or it is just played in that nice... and it kind of links with that whole that, you know... It's also like a child on the edge of, you know, maturity and stuff. Those themes that play into it a little bit, like, because there is a little bit of the idea of like the maturity of her woman developing kind of thing, and that, you know, some people relate this film to like as in your as you're going through like puberty and things like that, that your body changing, and that they just assume at first that basically Regan's she's just hitting puberty, you know, she's just becoming a big old bitch.
Because what is it that happens first? Is it the bed shakes loads, or is it when she comes downstairs and pisses?
I'm sure there's a.
I think it's the piss first, and then the bed.
Yeah,
after.
because they think she's ill.
Yeah,
the bed shaking where mum sees that happening. Happens before that. There are a few other little hints of like Regan like in the room, or feeling a bit off or ill, or kind of doing some
like Cujo, you know, you just see it in the background.
Yeah. She's just a bit off, you know. But no, the major one is that party when mum and you've got that's what's his name, Burke Dennings, who's like the weird like alcoholic, like I think he's like an ex-father or something like that at the party. And he's like going around just making inappropriate like jokes, kind of thing.
The German man,
generally making everyone like uncomfortable at her party, to the point where they're like, "You can just go now.
Yeah,
leave. Get out of this house."
He riles up a German, doesn't he?
You know? But he's also like meant to be like a close family friend. That's mainly all you really get from him until we find out later that he's dead.
He's dead, yeah.
So the pissing scene is obviously a clash, because it's a weird one to say, but like in the middle of like a big social event, like her just coming down, and then obviously they assume it's just because she's ill, but the reaction of everyone in the middle of them playing whatever they're playing, it's not Shake Your Ass.
It's not Shake Your Ass.
Whatever they're singing along to, like Chris McNeil's getting to like show off a bit that she's like, I'm an actress, I can sing.
Of course I can. I'm not insufferable at all.
And then it's like her daughter's there, and she's like, you need to go back to bed, and then she's like, oh, I just need to piss myself.
Yeah, I need to piss myself in front of your friends.
And again, in your head, you think that plays out longer because it does in Scary Movie, where it's like 2 minutes of pissing yourself. But no, it's really effective for the reaction, because you kind of imagine, like, what would that be like if you just, like, your child's, like, in the middle of that, and everyone thinking, oh my god, something's really wrong with your child. But I guess because she's also in this kind of upper class kind of situation where she's got like, it's a weird kind of part because it's like the 70s, so she's got like people of the church who are seen almost as like, oh, you must have honourable people at your parties, you know what I mean? Like, not like today when it would be like, stay out my house.
So, don't stay out.
I have a child in my house. Like, they've lost their respect over time. At one point in time, the community would have been together. Like, she'd have local friends, local things,
and
but she also had like,
would be like an important figure.
Exactly, like he's there and everyone's talking to him, like the priest. If I go to a party and there's a priest there, I don't want to talk. What do I talk to you about?
There was a really camp
The Exorcist was great, wasn't it, mate?
Yeah, The Exorcist was banging.
Did you see The Exorcist? You ever done an exorcism? You don't do exorcisms.
No.
Why am I talking to you?
Yeah, well,
that's so it's a really effective scene that kind of starts it off, and it's not like she turns. She doesn't turn like violent or anything like that straight away. It is mainly just a kind of an illness that's kind of starting to affect her. She's in bed and she's not well, and because it's not the same. That's not the same time that she has the shaking bed. She didn't take her upstairs that same night to the shaking bed.
No, but I think the shaking
over days. She's ill in bed for like several days, and her nanny or whatever she has made is like says to her about not being well. So again, like there is a little bit of like, even though it's happening, she's not the mother that's like constantly by her bedside. She's off doing other things at the same time. It's not until it really starts to like become like that bed shaking scene is the one that seems to kick her into action of like, this is not normal.
Well, she goes into hospital and she has those really uncomfortable looking tests.
That's one thing that does add a definite layer, I think, is just the fact that it's like a child that you're having to watch go through all of these
very painful looking procedures, man.
Yeah, and and again, it's kind of the days before they had like a million hospital dramas where you'd see like every other week there'd be like a kid on the show who's getting these kind of procedures. Like nowadays, you know, I mean, if you watch any hospital-based drama or things like that, then you tend to see this kind of thing quite a lot. But back then, it would have been, you know, it was mainly like, what's the one with like Dick Van Dyke? No, that's even 90s. That's even after that.
Yeah.
You know, they would mainly be quite like light-hearted hospital dramas.
Real bawdy.
Like, how are you doing today? We're doctors. We are respected people in the community. We're having fancy dinners. There's not much actually hospital stuff in here. No, because we don't want to show you that. That's far too.
Instead, it's
that's
just
not
like
classy.
It's just bawdy humour.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. Like from one of the ones that I can remember, like from the early kind of time TV shows, even through to like the 80s and 90s, like with like there was one like Dick Van Dyke where he was like solving murders while being a doctor, kind of thing. Like, you know what I mean? Like that kind of
Poirot.
I can't remember what the hell that one's called now off the top of my head, but nowadays it's more common. But I think at that point, the idea of seeing a child who's getting, you know, needles stuck inside of her and being held down and she's screaming and
and this is the point where we were kind of starting to raise go to Believer. It did push the boat a little bit more with what she was saying, you know, like and especially as she becomes fully possessed, she's saying a lot more worse stuff. Like she's calling, you know, one of the fathers a faggot. She's like, you know, she says all like fuck, cunt, you know, shit. I'm just gonna the rest of the podcast will now be me swearing. It will now be me swearing and saying homophobic
It's literally
slurs.
like on like South Park or so, you know, like, or South Park the movie when he's just trying to say as many bad words as like donkey, cock, bull, shit, mouth, motherfucking.
And it's just that kind of.
But this was
stuff.
This was the set, and this is what I was like. The creepy stuff is one thing, but it's that stuff that is shocking. The hospital stuff, the swearing, the child that's doing things that they shouldn't be doing as a child.
Yeah.
That's what makes this film kind of shocking in the kind of like, even today, that still is.
Yeah.
That's what made it a big impact back then. I don't think it was the horror aspects, because there were many other horrors around the same time that were just as equally as scary, but they didn't push the boundaries like this one did.
And I think there is one kind of one bit that I do love is when we kind of find out, and this is where the detective starts to come in, but we find a scene where like Regan's fast asleep, her window's open, and somebody says like, oh, she only had like the father come and visit her, but he was only here for 10 minutes and now he's gone.
Yeah.
And then we find out that the father was found dead at the bottom of the steps.
Yeah,
His neck was twisted back.
That was Denning.
Yeah. And the sacrament at the church where it was like defiled, and you start thinking like, okay, this is Regan slipped out, hadn't she?
Yeah, because I knew that obviously this is because at the end with Father Karras.
Yeah.
But I knew that someone had, so I remember when I was watching it going, have I missed something here, or did I watch the director's cut or something? Because I thought I'd seen like Father Denning die.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, I remember someone like going down the stairs and stuff, but it's because of the end of the film. But at that point I was like, oh, so we don't see it.
Yeah.
And again, we don't see a lot of death in this film. No. It isn't until the end.
The end, yeah.
That we do get to see when it does really amp up the violence. All of that build up, which is what makes it, and like we said with Believer actually, is that what we thought made it actually sometimes more effective is the fact that it doesn't waste. Because if you'd already seen several people have these things happen to them, the effect at the end would not feel so built up, so amped.
No, of course.
To suddenly feel that like violence. And that is, as you said, the first thing I think that kind of really makes her think, wait, something's wrong here. And she's already had little signs. And, but I don't think is it following this when she has the when she actually physically sees the bed shaking? Is that not why she?
No, this scene's after.
Is it after?
Yeah, because you have this
the bed
scene.
shaking is when she goes into hospital.
Yeah,
isn't it? She sees the bed shaking. She thinks something's really wrong.
Then they admit her, and then they're like, just give her this stuff to knock her out and keep her in bed because her personality's changed. And then Father Denning is killed, and we get the introduction of the subplot about the detective investigating. And because I forgot that there is a kill before the end, even though we don't see it, we do know that Regan killed someone. I forgot about the detective subplot, and I even forgot that he's in the end, and he comes and he sees the chaos after.
Yeah.
I completely forgot about it.
Yeah. He's not in a huge amount of it. He's only in a few scenes, isn't he?
Yeah.
Kind of scattered across the film, so he's not like a major part of it. But yeah, like I did forget that there is there is a slight kind of detective procedural part to it. One thing I was going to mention, which is because just before we move completely away from the hospital kind of scene, is one of the many things that surround this film. So this film is quite known for its curses.
Yes.
Like The Omen is kind of known for like bad things that happen. So for instance, like Burke Denning, the actor who played him died before the film was released, and a lot of people were like, oh, and in the film he's kind of got an alcoholic part to him, but he's got like a bad they say he's not well in the film. They say he's got something long, and he's got like a bad cough and a chest thing. And the actor then, although they said before he filmed it the actor was perfectly fine, before the film was released he died of influenza relating to chest-based problems related to the film, and all those kind of curses. But one of the other major ones, and the one I found most interesting that I found out, is there is an actual serial killer in this film. A real-life serial killer is in this film, in the hospital scene. Yeah. So his name is Paul Bateson. He plays one of the doctors when she first comes in, and they're holding her down. Yeah. And they have to insert the. So he was an actual kind of doctor. Yeah. Who did I think angiograms, which is part of like where they put catheters and stuff like that inside of your body. So he's the one that's like inserting things into her. But he's not the doctor with the glasses. I will show you a picture. But so the real serial killer that's in there, we'll post it on Instagram or something.
And
people don't know about
this. Killer.
So he was an actual. So he was a doctor, The only reason he got cast in the film is because William Fredrickson went round and the director of the film, went round and actually asked to see actual medical procedures to make those feel so real, to say how harsh and realistic it is in a hospital. And he actually asked to film at one of the hospitals, and he got given permission. And several of the doctors actually said, we're happy to actually take part in the scene to make it as realistic as possible. Yeah. And he was one of them. Okay. So he was known. 4 years after The Exorcist was released, Paul Bateson, who lived in New York, lost his job due to alcoholism at the hospital, at the university hospital. But he was also known for being part of Manhattan's club scene. He was homosexual, and at a time when obviously a lot of there's a lot of murders based on kind of pent up aggression of what they kind of call of some things, psychopathic, but they also say because people were like, you can't be that and you should be like that, and part of that club scene. And he befriended Addison Verrill, a reporter from Variety magazine, who was found dead in his apartment on September 14th 1977, thought by police to be the result of a break-in or robbery, but later found about a year later that it was actually Bateson who had murdered him. But the reason I say serial killer, because although they didn't have the proof to put him to it, a whole range of string of murders based from that same club, that same area, started to have little links to Bateson. And then the only reason he was caught was because someone confessed to kind of seeing Bateson with Addison Verrill for the murder, and then they did tests, drug tests, things like that, and they found a link between the night that he was there, the night, and who he had left with was Bateson. But then they started to string murders, but they didn't have enough proof to put the other murders onto him. Where they'd found basically the same club, left with the same person, never seen again, but they didn't have enough proof. But they had proof with Verrill because it had been more close to the time that they found some evidence in his apartment to link him back to it. So it's one of those things with a curse, but it's always a bit more odd when you're like, there was a literal kind of serial killer in that scene who may have already been a serial killer at the time when he filmed it. So it's one of those extra parts they add into the curse of The Exorcist. But it's an interesting... There's way more that I kind of glossed over that quickly, but there's way more to it. And go and read up on Paul Bates.
And that's much more interesting than my factoid that I teased.
I apologise. I've just shit on your factoid.
You shit on my factoid, which was that
yours might be more fun than a serial killer, but then again, murder. So
I mean, it's more fun to a very set.
That makes me think about. So you might notice that a few of our episodes now might have unusual titles where they're overly long. This one will probably be like possessed, masturbating girl, serial killer, priest banging.
So everything we could get.
That was only that's the odd way that we have no self-control, and we realise that when some of our titles are longer, for some reason more people seem to be able to find our show. So we're trying something out with longer titles, and if it continues to work, then we'll just keep doing weird ass titles. But now the whole episode I keep thinking about what will be the extra words I can add on to the end of this, and now I've got words like serial killer, which everyone loves a serial killer nowadays.
And as we were saying last night, we will proudly be demonstrating that we were once the number one podcast in film and histories in Japan and Algeria.
All of our episodes now will just end with every name country. Of every country in the world. We will name every country in it or every continent in the end of our episodes, until people find us. So at the end, no matter if it links or not, it will just say Japan, Algeria, Russia,
every country that exists,
Asia, everyone.
My little fun factoid is that Jason Miller, who obviously played Damien Karras, his hometown was Scranton, Pennsylvania, where The Office takes place. So if you're a fan of The Office, then there you go. Let us know which factoid you preferred. The really boring and uninteresting that there's a serial killer potentially in it, or the riveting, highly worth information that he is from
the link
Scranton.
That he is from Scranton.
I know which I prefer. I was saying that this going back to The Exorcist after a little tangent. The
all related.
All related, yeah. The part that really went from this is a bit slower. They've set the stage. They've introduced all the players. This is when the shit has hit the fan, and it started to get real creepy for me. Was the scene where Regan kind of continues to fucking worsen. Deteriorate. Yeah. That's the word I was trying to I was going to say disintegrate, but it doesn't work. Deteriorate. And then her mother goes to see her, and she's, masturbating with the cross, should we say. It's real bloody. She then fights her mum, says, "The sow is mine." Like, backhands her, and then the door slams. We get, like, the head turning, slightly, not doing the full 360, but doing, like, the 180. And that's when we start to get, like, for me, that was, like, when the intensity of the film, bang, started to kick up.
It does properly, like, push beyond there. There was a part of me when I don't know why, in that head turning scene, when I kept thinking in my head, I was like, they've possessed your body, but at the same time, it's in the new one, but I was like, at the same time, afterwards, you return to being your normal self. So really, as soon as they return, they should just be like dead anyway. Because it's like, remember the part when they broke your spine?
Yeah.
They literally disintegrated it by twisting your head around and around and around. That happened to your actual body, so you should just die now.
Yeah, well...
you should just be dead. And yes, I know, supernatural. We're not taking it seriously, but there was that part of my brain that was like, yeah, most of these things, I mean, I don't know what a mess is going to be down there. But also at the same time, your brain. But after it seemed like she just kind of... There is that kind of part of you where after they always just seem to... They've got a couple of bumps and bruises, but there's no like reflection on the fact that it's like your vagina is destroyed.
Yeah.
Your neck is fucking literally... There's no tendons left. In your head should just... Even if you are alive, you should be completely paralysed.
You just die.
Your head should just like flop backwards.
Yeah.
The second the demon's gone, it's like the demon strength is gone. Now my head must go...
Yeah.
That's looking at it from a realistic perspective, not a supernatural perspective. But I mean, those scenes are just like even the blood with the thing. Like, I remembered the masturbation scene, and I didn't remember the amount of blood that's kind of like spurting at the same time.
It's very
splattering everywhere.
It's very full on, isn't it?
It is very visceral. It's very. These are the kind of ones that definitely the new one kind of didn't push enough with these kind of scenes.
Yeah, because it's uncomfortable because of the very subject matter, and then it's kind of grim, and it's one of those things where you're like, it leaves so much to the imagination.
Her bedroom, also the way it's shot for all of the scenes in there, are just so perfectly lit.
Yeah,
that the room itself has an intensity to it. A room itself has a kind of it's dark with that slight kind of light shining through. And the whole room there's something that just feels like so like, and again, there isn't a huge amount of sound used in there because it kind of is from the creaking of the door as it opens up, and the what the fuck are you doing, and letting it kind of play, letting it kind of breathe, like, oh my god, like what the fuck is this girl doing to herself? And the way then again, but I think even with those scenes, I think it is again it's still the way that she then talks to her mother. That is what adds the kind of uncomfortable shockingness to it. That the child is saying these like disgusting things to her mother about what she's like doing to herself. Or about
she puts her fucking mum's head down there, doesn't she?
Oh yeah, she does. I forgot that bit. Yeah, That's what I mean. How fucking like that?
Bargain.
It's literally the stuff that I did wonder with, like I said about insensitivity, whether that affects how we can do them to this day. Because people are just too like, oh, you can't have a parent doing that to their child in a modern day film. But that's kind of the level that in some ways you need to push it to. But they don't take it too far with like, because like I said, these are quite like spread out. Yeah, they're across the third act obviously, but they're quite spread out. Like even as we start to get the priests and stuff like that, you forget that there's like this, and then it kind of goes back to like the characters for a while. Yeah, it doesn't go like this. Then the priests arrive, and then and then it's time to get your proton guns out and just start blasting the bitch like Ghostbusters. You know what I mean? It's there were lots of scenes, and even in the Exorcism, there's like breaks. Yeah, they don't just do it, and it's not just like we get it out in one go. They have to keep breaking because of to give that feeling of how intense it is. Yeah. So we've had in this time, obviously, we've had the build up with Karras and his mother's past. His mother's kind of got to the point of dementia. His mother's then he's found out she's passed
died.
away.
Yeah. And he wasn't
and
there.
he's being consoled by another, like a father. And
and
he does say he's at the point of brink of like, I'm done with this now.
Yeah,
like,
and she lives in like an absolute shithole, for lack of a better word. You
Yeah.
know, and it's that kind of guilt that that Father Karras has, that like,
because he was like away, wasn't he?
He's away.
He came back,
but he's like, but even then, he's like, I can't really like provide for my mum. She won't. She's a proud woman, so she like won't let him put her anywhere.
But even in his apartment, because you see his apartment, and he just lives in like one tiny little room
he
that
lives
looks
in
pretty shit too.
And it's what
there's that contrast between him and Chris McNeil almost, because they're the two main characters that you actually follow. Regan, yes, but Regan is actually kind of a side character because we don't specifically focus on Regan herself.
Well, they
have parts, but I wouldn't say that. I'd say you mainly have Karras and Chris McNeil are the main two that you are kind of going back and forth between, with occasional bits with the detective and Regan kind of thing.
Well, this is something you might have to tell me this. This might have gone over my head, but why did Regan get possessed? Because there is a bit where obviously she did the Ouija board, but there's a couple of things where she's getting possessed, and Father Karras is, he's starting his investigation into is this a possession, and he said about her mum, and he's like, well, your mum, Regan's mum knew that her father, his mother had died, and he was feeling guilty about it and stuff like that, so maybe he heard from her. He's like recording her, he's talking to her, and Pazuzu, the possessed Regan, says like, do you know what she did? Do you know why I have her? And he hints at like her doing something other than a Ouija board, like half making a deal or something.
I don't know,
and it might have gone over my head, or maybe I misinterpreted it.
Well, that was kind of what I was saying before. Is I don't think there is a concrete. That's what I think kind of makes it interesting. I don't think there is a concrete reason given. The Ouija board is the access, but I think the implication of what she did, I think, is more of a talk about. I think that's either linking to Regan or her mother, and linking to why she was focused in on because.
Yeah,
but I don't specifically remember them explaining exactly why it is Regan that he has. Like, she's allowed access to get that. Yeah. But when it said that line, I didn't know whether that was about Regan or whether that's about the mother and what the mother actually did.
Yeah.
And that there's something more to the mother. But I don't specifically remember a scene where it says anything about what the mum did. Like in the new one, like in Believer. It has a line like that, like what he did, and then it's the father because the father chose the daughter over. I don't remember a scene like that about Chris McNeil though.
No,
because I thought it was something that the mother did that was more of a relation to why all of this kind of occurred.
Yeah.
But I can't remember a part that specifically explains it.
No, I mean I
just thought it was kind of left kind of open, that there are several links, like several little like teases. Yeah. But you're never specifically given why. But I do think the Ouija board is the way he was able to access.
Oh yeah, I think we know that. My only thing is that maybe they did it because it's the most innocent that you can have. It's like a young girl. If you're looking at Christianity, that's like probably the most innocent thing you can get.
Yeah, like the young virgin.
Yeah, the young virgin. So like possessing her, but it's just that like that specific line where he's like, "Do you know what she did?" And it's kind of it made it sound like she made a deal or she did something, and I was like, "Oh, maybe like." Yeah. Maybe we've got a little bit of like Rosemary's Baby here. Maybe she made contact with it and was like, I want my mum to be successful,
That's why I thought it might have been Chris McNeil, and I was wondering whether Chris McNeil, in order to become the celebrity, the person she is, she's done something bad, like the implication that the mother has not always been such a good kind of. She's done things that she regrets in order to get where she is.
Yeah.
Or she's done those things like taking out someone, like ruining someone else in order to become where she is, or blowing every producer in Hollywood. I don't know.
Maybe. it was New York in the 70s.
But no, it's a hard one to know. But I do think there is that contrast between Karras and McNeil.
Yeah,
where you've got this woman who's well off, got the stuff to be like, oh, my daughter's ill, here's some money thrown at it, can you do this, can you do this? Even when she's going to the priest and being like, I need, like, I should get this kind of thing. There's almost a little bit of a, you know, if anyone just walks up and be like, you need to do an exorcism, but there's a little bit with her that's a little bit like, I should, you know, I'm a person people know, things like that. Like, she's not saying it like that, but there's a little bit of a privilege where she thinks that she can just go up to people and she'll get it. When she goes to the hospital, she'll just get what she wants for her daughter, kind of thing.
I guess that's her.
And then on the opposite of that, the priest kind of lives a very humble, small life, and his mother doesn't really get any help. And when his mother does get put into like a not great kind of care facility kind of thing, and then she doesn't last very long. There's that kind of contrast between like the help that one side gets to the other, and or even the other priests, even the other priests that you see that seem to be much more like their local priests. They're like lauded upon and they're like looked at really like because, but you get a little bit of a fraud kind of like with the, I can't remember what the priest. There's a priest there specifically that is very kind of lauded by everyone at the party. There's a couple of them there, and they're all like more the local kind of the men of the local churches and the kind of the higher ups kind of thing. And then you've got Karis, who's seen as someone who's much more of kind of the, well, like you said, the person that's more there to deal with the people, not just the person to give out the vague. But
well, they
seem very well off, and he seems like he's in a very kind of dark place, and he is because. Maybe as the psychologist, he leans too much into like that psychological part of it, or he's questioning everything more than they do.
Maybe.
But it's just the fact that you've got these guys that seem to be like loving being at the parties and stuff like that, and then Karis is seen as a bit of the odd one. Even when he goes before the council of them about the exorcism, he's seen like he sometimes feels a bit like all of the other priests, which is it's an odd scene when you've got all of those like priests and they're talking about we don't. You know, that's not a practice that we do, and you know, you need to stay within your lane, and you need to make sure you stay within medical reasoning. But then he's like, but we are meant to be of faith and things like that.
And it's interesting because they do mention, and I found this particular part interesting, where they were talking about a exorcism and possession as like a phenomenon that's happened for thousands of years. They're like, this is something that we found in cultures going back, thousands of years back to like cavemen and stuff like that. And the doctors basically say an exorcism effectively, like she's done this Ouija board and she's kind of got this overwhelming feeling of guilt or something that's manifested itself as like a voice and has basically taken over her consciousness. It's almost like but like kind of split personality. It's like thing of belief, and that well, if you have an exorcism, because if she willed it into existence,
if she believes it,
the power of belief, they say, don't they? And it's really interesting that the doctors are like, just fucking give her an exorcism. It's not gonna do any harm
from a psychological standpoint. And that's the way that Karis is actually. He's not necessarily looking at even he's a little bit drawn because of it being
it's lost
both a medical, but also that. But the more he sees of Regan, the more you see his faith kind of return in a kind of. There's no medical way to explain the shit that I'm seeing right now. Like her kind of almost floating off of the bed and stuff. There's no medical way that she's managed to just manifest that in her personality. But no, it is interesting the way that he is affected by it. The Karis' story does, I think, make one of the most interesting parts of the film. Because we get to see that kind of progression from a man kind of broken. But it's just interesting. I was trying to like look at the characters from a kind of like how they kind of play off of each other. And he just feels a bit like a kind of a shit on kind of like in comparison to the rest of them.
Yeah, he does.
And he even says that we haven't done an exorcism actually like that's been gone since like the 1600s or something like that.
Yeah, they do say it's something that they rarely do. Although they say that Merrin has performed one before.
That's what I mean. So it's a bit of contradiction going on because different characters are saying different things about like. But that's I think they mean like I think he says since the 1600s, but I think he means maybe that's a practice that would have been back then. Like that's
like more common, maybe.
That's ancient. That's not something we do anymore because there's been no evidence that we'd need to do it. Whereas Merrin, obviously, from out in the middle that he finds who's off in the middle of wherever. I can't remember
Yeah,
whereabouts.
I'm sure
he is.
it's Iraq.
Well, out in the middle of Iraq,
Yeah.
and he is, finding demons and kicking ass. But he knows that he's not got the power. So Merrin obviously comes into it because he hasn't got the expertise to do this.
Yeah.
And he's not allowed to do it. Again, that's a common theme that Fred's, isn't it? That he's not actually meant to do it, but he researches and finds someone who knows Merrin and finds that link to get him to come over. Because there's that whole scene of like the priest running through the forest, running up to Merrin, and then there's like again that kind of slow thinking, do I go?
Yeah,
and then here he is, and
it's a great shot when he's outside of the house. You know?
I mean, it's iconic. It's possibly one of them. Like, I'm trying to think of what are the most iconic shots in horror, and that poster, that look is just. I don't. There aren't many shots I can think of that probably are better than that one. It was my worry with the new one that they were going to try and recreate it in a really obvious way.
Yeah.
It was like, no, don't do that.
I'm
really glad they did. I think there's a piece with like the police coming out where the lady goes at the door and it kind of shines around her with the police light, which is kind of a wink to it, but not in the same way of like having the priest come out of his car like in the new one and then like walking up and being like, this street lamp is suddenly shining on me. You know what I mean? Like, it's iconic. And not just because of the lights, the window that's like kind of a creepy atmosphere, and when you look at the picture in the window, and also just the costume, the way he's dressed, amazing.
The fog, everything.
It's one of the most perfect shots in cinema.
Yeah,
horror, not even just horror, in cinema in general, I think is one of the best shots that's ever been done.
We do. There is the one thing,
and the music rises as well at that point.
Actually, I don't. In the version I had, there wasn't any music during that part.
Oh, is there not?
Really shocked me. There wasn't any tubular bells.
It might not be. Yeah, I might just be adding it in my head. I think The Exorcist, and I hear that I could just be adding it in because I think actually you're right. No, I think I remember thinking. I thought, this is when the tubular bells kick in.
Maybe it's the trailer.
I think maybe it's something like that. Yeah, no, you're
so
right.
I've definitely seen that.
No, I remember thinking now. Yeah, I'm just linking Exorcist in that scene.
Yeah,
that shot is The Exorcist.
Yeah,
even though it does. There's no possessed girl in it. That shot is The Exorcist.
Yeah, it sums it up, man. But you know that like. This is the one thing I really like about The Exorcist, but I also think is slightly a little bit weak about the film. Just to throw a little jab in there.
It's not a completely perfect film.
No, of course not. But the opening is amazing. We see, we open with Merrin, and we have the statue of Pazuzu. We have the face-off. We have the fighting dogs. We're like, this is, that this is a confrontation that's building. And then Merrin kind of disappears.
Yeah,
and all you hear his name being mentioned by Regan. Yeah. But I would have liked to have a bit more Merrin,
Yeah, I think he is meant to be as that big figure that comes in to he's like bigger than he is, a kind of thing.
Yeah, John Lennon.
A little bit more apart from that opening, and then it is just at the end, isn't it? It's just the third act that he comes in.
Yeah,
there's not much development on him. No, you're right.
Like I would have liked to have seen him maybe in Iraq researching Pazuzu.
Yeah. A little bit more build up with that, like how or what can I do or what can I take or how am I going to do this? Like the Rocky theme tune kicks in.
Yeah,
he's training.
He's reading.
As he's training for Pazuzu, he's like outside. He's next to that statue, just like boxing.
Yeah, and then
I'm going to get you, Pazuzu. I'm coming for you.
He's at the top of the Iraq mountains and he just shouts Pazuzu
while lifting his arms in the air.
And then the next bit is the silent shot of him outside.
Yeah.
And Apollo Creed's there.
No, it's not that this film, we have said about that. I think the character building is what adds and makes those that final towards the end of the second act into the third act, when Regan gets really full on, really kind of shocking in her language and stuff. It's kind of what helps it feel more true, and the jabs she makes towards the characters feel more effective, and that's something again like the new one had that character stuff, but sometimes it didn't feel as connected because we didn't really know some of the characters. So like Diddler Priest. Yeah, Diddler Priest. She made a jab towards him, and it was like, but we don't really know you. If she called you a diddler, then I'd agree because you look like a diddler.
You're a diddler.
You know what I mean? But and as I said, but that's not to say that necessarily there isn't a little bit of like the cop's there, but he's not really like he's in a few scenes.
Yeah.
He doesn't really feel like it kind of feels like an ineffective cop.
Yeah.
It's not really, and all the questions you're asking, and it never really feels. I know it's there to say that someone is on this investigation, mainly because of the death of Burke Jack Denning, but it's kind of a little bit like, it doesn't feel. You get a shot of him at the end, but it doesn't feel like there's much to that. To talk a little bit about some of the negatives. So there is a little bit of fat in there that could definitely be could have been excised. And again, like we said, and because thinking about like the legacy and her coming back, and when we talked about Believer, we said that Chris McNeil, although she has some cool lines or some cool parts, her scene could have been completely removed. Yeah. And I think watching this original confirms even more in my mind that Chris McNeil's character, she's not Laurie Strode. No. She's not the mate, you know what I mean? If anything, Regan is the the one that's been through it. Yeah. Internalises it. Would have been the more interesting character to get an internalised voice. Yeah. Because you never really get to hear Regan talk about what actually happened. You might in The Heretic, but most people forget that even happened. But she never gets to internalise that kind of thing. Whereas Chris McNeil isn't exactly the most warm or character that you kind of draw to. She's kind of the mother on the sidelines, and even as she said in the new one, she was never actually in the room. She weren't in the room when it happened. Baby.
Well, yeah, and that was a line that did stick out to me in Believer that I think we didn't comment on at the time, but when she was like, "Yeah, I didn't take part in The Exorcist because of the patriarchy," or something like that.
It makes total sense in, that she's not in the room in the actual... in the original, this makes total sense that she's not, because it's like, what? You've got nothing to add here. Yeah. But it only adds to the sense that, like, you're not really... You're the character that saw your daughter go through some things. Yes, you researched and things like that in the years that followed in the new one, obviously. But, it's not something that's like, I didn't end that film and I was like, what does Chris McNeil do now? A little bit more, what did Regan do next? Maybe, because I'm wondering what a girl does once she's been through that trauma kind of thing. Yeah. Which, again, the sequels did try to touch on that, just not very well.
Yeah, I might watch them eventually, but I don't know.
I'd check them out just for the, as I said, to mention it. The Heretic, is a weird fucking ass film. I know people, hate it. But when a film goes real weird with it, I kind of find more interest in that than a film that goes straight. Whereas Exorcist 3, which people love, as I think I've said before, they go so straight with it. It's like a crime procedural. To me, it felt like a TV crime procedural where it's following a guy. You didn't really like it. And although it has some kind of cool scenes and has an almost iconic jump scare that you've probably seen, or something, cool. Which doesn't work as well when suddenly you've seen it out of context. Yeah. Those kind of things. But apart from those kind of bits, I found that one majorly boring. And then, what else did we get? We got the other ones, The Beginner and stuff like that. Yeah, I just remember not being that good even when I watched it when I was like 10 years old. I was like, this is shit.
I'm not going to watch it. Being honest. I'm not going to watch it.
But yeah, those ones. So, they've not had a great track record in terms of that or following up on this original story, which, again... doesn't necessarily. This film could have been fine as it was.
Well, it's very contained. It doesn't need a whole bunch of stuff. I think for the most part, it's paced quite well. I'm always surprised that it's like an hour and 50 minutes.
Yeah, I think when I watched it, this is again because I'd heard people saying slow and I hadn't watched it in so long. Yeah, I was expecting possibly to be even slower. But for me, this is like slow build, but a good kind of suspenseful slow build, character build. This for me is like, I compared it because I compared some of the shots that I felt actually looked very similar to Halloween. Yeah. To John Carpenter, they're slow building. You're kind of getting to know the characters. Nothing majorly scary happens for a portion of the film. Yeah. But to me, it's that kind of good like building of the character, building of the setting everything into place so that then it can get real hyped up in the last third act. Yeah. And that's the same here. I think they've got a similar kind of tonality to it, that they both have that kind of slow build, but not in a really boring. In my comparison, I'd say to something that's a similar film that I found quite boring and felt didn't really go anywhere was Rosemary's Baby.
Oh, very interesting.
So it's not one of my favourites. When I've watched it, I find that is quite a slow slog. Characters, not really likeable characters. Doesn't feel like it goes, and then the third act doesn't feel like that hyped up, whereas this one at least builds to something that's, you know, effective and interesting and shocking.
Yeah.
Whereas, yes, that one has shocking parts, but it's not enough to build, like, it didn't feel like enough to be like, oh, that was a great movie kind of thing.
Yeah, fair enough.
Plus, Roman Polanski's a diddler.
Yeah, I mean, I really like the film. Absolutely love the book. But yeah, if we see Roman Polanski, we get the 3D on the table. You know, he's banned from the podcast,
like many countries.
Yeah, many countries. We will not sign the petition.
Let's go to the exorcism. Let's get into the meaty bit, because we've talked for a while skating around.
We have skating around the exorcism
because again, we can't yes, all of that stuff, but at the end of the day, this is the part that you all remember.
And
this is the part that stands out probably the most. You know.
And it's weird because it doesn't feel like it's very long. It must only be 25 minutes, 20 minutes maybe.
Yeah, at most it's like the last half an hour or so.
Yeah,
at most. But obviously, so we've talked. Merrin is at the door and in. But yeah, after that, like we said, like this is when Chris McNeil pretty much is just occasionally shots of her reacting. But that's pretty much it for now for her.
Yeah, she kind of gets sidelined.
I love when she talks to them outside of when they have breaks.
Yeah.
Sorry, you love.
Well, I love that as soon as Merrin gets into the house, Regan starts screaming, you know, Merrin.
Yeah.
You know, it's class, and that's why I was hoping we would have had a little bit more of him.
Yeah,
because it makes it sound like there is, and the setup is that there is this epic confrontation between Merrin and and Pazuzu, but it feels very much like Damien Karras is the more focal character, and his loss of faith and guilt over his mum is much bigger.
I think it's because he's the more like down to earth, kind of close to home, kind of more real. Whereas Merrin is almost like bigger than thou figure. You know,
he's
what
like
I mean?
Indiana Jones.
Yeah, he's like this. He's like this character that's kind of built up, and it's one of those battles. It's hard to say because, in one way, I want to know more about what he did, but it could also be a case of the more you know about him, the more you might be like,
gets rid of the mission.
It kind of takes away.
I could see it.
Because I think part of that, like that shot when he comes to the house, is the fact that here is this like mythical. He's like the savior figure kind of thing. He's here to kind of save it, and
Daddy's home,
which is kind of what plays so nicely into actually how it goes down. Because that's kind of what he's built as. He's built as like, here is the big daddy. And although he does some effective things, he ultimately fails.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? So that's it. Like, he is this big daddy that we built up. But I think maybe that's why he is built as such this big mystery character, and why they cast an actor who was a fairly well-known character compared to the rest of the cast, because it's like, here it is, in he comes, boys. He's gonna knock Regan out.
Yeah, he's
going like 10 rounds.
Yeah, he's just gonna batter her.
He's gonna just batter the shit out of her. But to be fair, when he gets in, and again, he's pretty much all business when he gets in.
Yeah,
he is like, where is it? I can hear her. He goes straight towards her into the room, and there she is, like sat now, faces like completely like the classic shot. She's proper like looking at him, and like screaming, like you said, Merrin, and just sticking her tongue out and screaming at him, and like, what you gonna do? And then obviously he comes straight out with crucifixes and things like that, and she starts screaming even more.
Yeah, which is awesome.
But yeah, he does talk obviously to Karras actually before they step into the room to kind of be like, here's the game plan. Basically, we're just going to go at her. We're going to keep going. It sounds like porn or something like that. You just got to keep going at her and going at her, baby. Until yeah, but I mean, this is a hard. Weirdly, actually, I'm finding this a hard scene to describe because it plays out in such an action way that it sounds like I'm just talking about the scenes, and I feel like you know the impact of these like scenes when you've got all of these bits, like the body shaking, her body thrusting on the bed, like her head starting to turn or twist or convulsing, the vomiting.
It still looks foggy to this day.
Yeah, that's over Karras, isn't it?
Yeah. He does it earlier in the film, but then she's also like, when he's spraying her with like holy water, she's like lying on the side, and it's like dribbling out of her mouth, and it's so gross.
I mean, it's been said before, but the performance with Regan is for a child to be doing those kind of parts and stuff like that, because
it's very full on.
What I mean? Like, they could have had someone else completely under the makeup and doing all of that stuff. But the fact that Linda Blair is the one kind of as a child doing a lot of this and obviously the voices and stuff like that is someone else dubbing over at times. They've done her voice, but then they've mixed it in with a creepier voice to add into it, kind of thing. But it's such a full on. Like you imagine what it was like, and I haven't heard necessarily bad things about that part of it. That she was like quite looked after and stuff.
I think she nearly got really badly injured on one scene. I think.
I've heard because a lot of the throwing around and stuff like that, getting chucked around the room, and there's a bit obviously when Regan gets thrown against the wall or goes against the wall or hits against, when they're like, do they slap her or something like that?
At one point,
one of them breaks, don't they? Then when they hit,
Father Callis just starts clapping.
I think they accidentally realised they accidentally clamped her a bit too hard.
Yeah, just fucking whopped her.
So what you fucking say about my mother?
Bad.
But yeah, it is a kind of non-stop, but that's why you forget when it comes to like breaks. There's like 2 breaks that they take during it. One obviously is the one when not Karis Merrin goes to the bathroom and has that whole kind of he doesn't actually go through.
He's just
it's when he stops and breathes in the mirror, and I think there is flies though, isn't it? That is like a creepy part of it, is that he does get a fly. I swear there's like flies in that. That's obviously in Scary Movie, but I swear there is like something that he's looking at in the mirror that kind of affects
the flies is, I'm sure, I remember the flies being in The Omen.
Oh, okay.
Yes, right? I remember that. Although I watched it, he is on the toilet and he's got something like in his throat, but I remember the flies swarming the priest when he comes to bless the house in the Amityville Horror.
Oh yeah. Maybe that's where they're mixing together in my head.
Yeah. He just does
I mainly just remember him going to the bathroom and he stares into the mirror.
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck is happening here?
Yeah.
And then, obviously, because there's a part, obviously, that at the same time, he goes to break to do that while Karis is left.
Yeah.
Which seems like a terrible choice.
Yeah.
But that, like, Merrin has to, like, leave. Like, you can see that Merrin is more overwhelmed than he actually expected to be. Like, he thought this was going to be more straightforward than it actually is. Like, he said this is going to be, we have to keep going, we have to push through. And I think he's the first one that break. Like,
he's the first one
to break. I mean,
clogs, isn't he?
Yeah, he's the first one to kind of take that break, which starts immediately show that this bigger than now character is maybe not as strong as we think he is.
Well, I think he hides it better because
Karis doesn't hide it.
He starts to fucking get stuck in. He's insulting.
Well, because while he's out, it's like Mummy's here with us, and, and
we
talking,
have your mother.
Yeah, and what we're going to do to her.
She
and
sucks cock in hell.
Yeah,
that's so good.
Such a good line.
And then start speaking.
And you can see he's affected, but again, that's good because we've built up with that character.
We've built to it, yeah.
So anything he says, that is a downside, obviously, is that anything that's kind of put towards Merrin, it's like we don't really know the context of some of the stuff that's kind of shouted towards him. That's why that stuff's a bit more vague, whereas anything that's said to Karis, we're like, okay, you can see, it depends on how much you were interested or affected by that part of the storyline, but if you can see that and you can if you can emotionally relate with him as having just lost his mother and stuff like that, the idea that he knows that he's talking to what he feels is a real demon and that they're talking and know these things that no one else would know about how she died and how she was left and how he didn't look after her, is affecting. Like, you can see how it literally breaks him down to the point where it's almost like going into like a fetal position, kind of. He's like going lower and lower, and then blah.
It's real good. It's really intense.
It is. It's definitely. This is part of what makes it by far probably my favourite possession, because I think this scene just is so. I don't think anyone's ever matched how intense, how shocking it is. Lots of people have done, some real interesting stuff within the genre, but I just don't think it matches how in fucking full on this scene is. And the level that they put the girl to is why almost every other possession film, when it tries to do something about a person or a child, is just like, yeah, but you're just not pushing it as far as they did. Yeah. They did it. And if you do try to push it that far, it feels like you're just trying to rip it off.
Yeah,
so
it's really
impossible. And we said this film is like the holy grail of these kind of films, like a supernatural horror. This is why everyone that comes up is like, who are you putting it up against? You're putting it against The Exorcist. It is the one. Yeah. And it's why it's kind of like, and that's why we felt with the new one a bit unfair, because it's like nothing can live up to it. No. But at least they're trying to do something. Not that they need to, but if they're going to, then at least try. Whereas it is really hard to live up to these parts. And obviously, when Merrin does come back into the room and they start splashing the holy water and they're going through and then this is when you get the power of Christ compels you. And she starts screaming and rivering, and there's vomit coming out of her mouth again, but around her, and her body's shaking, convulsing, she's screaming, her eyes kind of change and develop colour, and
they're like all golden and weird.
And she's just like crying, like grabs her hair, and it's just a real like, oh my god, but then it's like a kind of like, she kind of gets back up, and it's like he like has like a heart attack basically, doesn't he?
Yeah.
He just, oh shit, like hits against the wall and doesn't get back up.
Well, I think the thing that, because you get that amazing scene where I think it's around this point. It might be a little before, it might be a little after. But you get that amazing scene where she's almost like doing like the Thriller dance. You know, she's doing that really amazing pose, and then behind her you get the Pazuzu statue, which peeks up a couple of times throughout
from
the
Merrin's
film.
perspective, because that's the main thing you've got with Merrin.
Is
that that he knows that bit of it.
Yeah.
He knows the statue. He knows of Pazuzu.
The beef runs deep, you know.
Yeah.
And I think I'm not sure whether that's what
I think it is, because he
he
sees that before he dies, because he looks at it. He got thrown a little bit before that, but he sees that, and then just suddenly he kind of freezes, as if, I don't know, it's like a realization, as if suddenly he's like, I can't beat this, and I don't know what to do with this, and it's like in his face you see like a freak out, and then he's gone. And then Farrah Karras is left there like, what the fuck do I do now? So the expert is gone. What do I do? And then this is the transfer of demon. So the only way to get out of it, he sees, is to take it upon himself. So he asks for it to come into him and leave the girl alone. Because he'd made the promise earlier when he had gone out of the room at one point, when they'd both left the room. That's the only other time I think during it you see Chris McNeil, because they have the conversation and she's like, she's going to die, which is one of the better scenes with her, because you see the true emotion that she's suddenly feeling, that she's just there, that she is on the sidelines, and she has no power here. She doesn't know. She basically thinks she's just waiting for her daughter to either get better or be dead. And that's where she is. And he kind of makes a promise that she's not going,
that she won't die.
That she won't die. And this is when the realization that he kind of almost, the only way I can do this and live up to that and get this girl free is to go with her. Is to go with the demon kind of thing. So, and it's a real interest that when she's got her, and that's when she's against any kind of, and you kind of really feel it, like they're throwing each other kind of back and forth as they're holding each other, and the demon's just taunting, like as if like that's never going to happen. But you see his eyes kind of change as it happens, and you see Regan just start to scream as
even
his
face
eyes changes.
Kind of change. His face briefly changes.
Yeah, that's what I mean. He gets that. You see it within him, like the same kind of face that Regan just had, kind of starts to appear with, especially within his eyes. And I think that's the shock of it. If it's like, it's not only the shock that's like, oh, so this is how it does it. It's the fact that literally it goes suddenly to throw himself out the window. And it's that sudden shock of like, I've got it in me, and what else do I do? And with that last remaining part of himself, it's like the only way to do this is maybe I can kill the demon with me. Boom, out the window.
And for me, it's this moment of like redemption for him. Because I think by that point, the idea of Pazuzu is to like basically get people to abandon God, right? Like, look, if God loves you so much, why would he let this happen to someone? And why would you not be able to do anything? But I think in that moment, he's like, I think his faith comes back, because he's like, I have the power to do something. He gets possessed, but then he fights it off. And he goes back to himself, and he's like, all right, I'm out the window.
I think I think that's the one thing. You see the fear, and I think this is why Karras is such a kind of a beloved kind of within this film, and I think maybe comes out possibly as the strongest in this film.
Definitely.
Not just because of his sacrifice, but because of the journey you see him go on from being completely lost of faith at the beginning to slowly having these little moments of I could do this, to actually being like, I'm going to fight for this regardless if no one else is going to fight for this. Like, I'm going to fight for this. And there's also a little bit of push there with his mother, like, I didn't fight for my mother enough. I'm going to fight for this girl. I'm not going to lose another... Like, no one else deserves to die because I'm not trying to do what I should do. And that's a little bit of his faith. And I think the scene I said about the mother, you see a little bit of that, because before he's very, like... we're going to try these things, but there's no guarantee. This isn't going to work. So when he makes that defining, your daughter is going to live, he definitely seems to have got it when he goes back into that room. But, very quickly you see how that can be stumbled mainly because he's like, this is too much power. Yeah. We can't do anything about it. So I think his faith is rebuilt, but he hasn't got the belief that that we can defeat evil is now the problem. And he's there. And then that, like you just said in that final part, that's when it's like, it's not that they're defeated, but we can win in some ways. Yeah. If we keep fighting within our religion, we can win. And for that, I must sacrifice myself. Yeah. And then the scene itself where he's going down and this is why I think this is such an effective scene, because we didn't see it earlier. Yeah. And it's something, again, that modern horror films really fuck up. And what I think actually was effective with the new one as well, not as effective and scary as it could have been, but it definitely worked towards the end, is a lot of horror films, they show too much. They do so much that by the time it gets to the end, the third act's always filled. And I find with a lot of modern horror films, and we find it more often than not, I feel like when we talk about a lot of films recently, we say it was so good until the third act. Because they'd built so much up. Either they'd done so much gore, so much horror, so much thing. By the time you get to the third act, you're a bit like, yeah, but that wasn't, we've already seen better than that. You've already toppled yourself, and therefore you've made your ending weaker because we can't. Whereas this one is all like the fact we don't see Burke Denning's death, twisted neck, thrown down the stairs. If we'd already seen that in the film, this wouldn't suddenly feel as like, oh, well, you're just repeating yourself. We've already seen this happen. Yeah. But mainly that was more to be the setup of the idea that there is a stair right below there. We've set up the idea. We've set how violent it can be. So when you see him going smashing down those stairs, and I think it's almost worse in my head than it actually is in the scene. But, you still hear those concrete brick, and he's smacking down them. And then at the bottom, you hear like a thump, and you see like the blood start to pour around him. And then you get lots of people starting to like appear. Yeah. And you get that shot of them, and the priest from the local church who had been at the party last rites, right there, which again is just oddly like kind of an effect, like a kind of, I think plays as a kind of a little emotional kind of, I don't know why, it just seemed quite like releasing that he's giving him that last rite kind of thing. Seemed like an appropriate ending instead of just leaving it at he's dead. Like he's still getting that moment of peace or that moment
in a strange way.
The moment of people kind of giving him respect that I feel like he hadn't got the whole film.
Yeah. But it's part of the redemption, is that he knows that by letting himself die, like Pazuzu kind of doesn't win, like he doesn't get to kill Regan. I say he when it's like a Mesopotamian demon, I think they defy gender. When, but Pazuzu doesn't win because Regan's not hurt, doesn't get killed. Father Karras may die. But his sacrifice is an act of love, for his fellow humans. Yeah. And it's that kind of goes against what Pazuzu's standing for. And then he gets his last rites of, like, whether the other father knew that they were doing an exorcism or anything like that, but he's still getting his religious, send-off almost. Yeah.
No, it's hugely effective. It's hugely effective. It's the one thing I've learned. A little bit of burnt there. Yeah. Is a hugely effective ending.
Disgust our listeners.
That's why I said it just feels like the film goes from slow, but it builds and it builds and it builds to a satisfying build where it's like you've got to the top now. Yeah, you've taken it as high as you can, and the whole film is that kind of build, which is why I think it's fine when you've got films that are like slower in their character studies. Yeah. But they do still need to build to something that feels like a bigger climax. And that's what effective is. And some of the best films ever are because they slowly build to that huge climax. And I used Halloween as an example before, but that is it. It builds that big final and then it has that kind of mysterious, he's there, he was shot 6 times. It feels like a scary, suspenseful big build at the end. And that's some of the greatest horrors of all time that have that same kind of build. Whereas as I said, I don't say that with certain ones where it just feels like they just throw everything against the wall the whole film and then they just hope that something's going to stick.
Something sticks, yeah.
And that's what a lot of possession films feel like for me honestly, most of the time. Is that they're just throwing, oh, this will be a creepy scene, this will be a creepy noise in the background, this will be a creepy jump scare of the cat you've seen a million times jump down, or the pans that are flinging in the kitchen, or whatever, that just they seem to repeat, or just pushing it further, like your child bouncing around the room, or whatever the fuck it is. It's like, okay, great, but the problem is, like, do you know where this is going towards the end? Have you got anything that actually makes this film like we're building up? Because I would rather see moments of character building instead of seeing another scene of you doing that, because by the time I'm about an hour or so into this, I'm going to be bored as fuck of just seeing scenes of this.
Yeah.
Like, you can get bored of horrific scenes, just like you can get bored of too much character, too much, you know, if they don't do it properly.
If it doesn't pay off well, especially, you know, which I think this film ultimately does. I said at the start, I always forget just how much building there is in the film. I always forget how much slower it is, and watching it back each time I was watching, you know, certain scenes or thinking about how the film was paced, I was thinking, yes, it's very similar to, you know, Believer did try and keep it maybe a bit too tame and not exactly filled with scares, but it did keep, you know,
it stayed true to that
part of the film
without just completely like ripping off the same film. Kind of thing. It didn't feel exactly the same. It felt like it had its own story to tell.
It got a little
few
closer
moments.
Times, you know, especially
they're always going to when they're legacy ones. They're always going to be like, they have to take influence from some of it, don't they?
Yeah,
but I was going to say one thing, just because we didn't mention it in that previous one, and there are enough links here to read to that last episode, because if you've seen our Believer episode, if you haven't, go check it out. But one other thing was, as in the episode talking about the demon, but something I only just found out that I'll throw in now because it's linked, is that it's not Pazuzu in the Believer.
Isn't it?
No, it's not the same. It's Lamastu or something like that. So they actually went with a different one, because you actually see the different demon in like two of the scenes, which I don't remember seeing at all, but apparently the demon flashes in the background like twice in the film. I don't remember. I don't remember seeing that at all. But yeah, so it's not actually even the same demon, it's a different one. So
but then how does it remember?
It reacts like it is as if they know about it. But I don't know. I think because in the scene when they say about it being Link, they say they react like as if they know of him, or if they've been, but I think it might be more that they know of someone who's been possessed before, or who has been near possession before. Not so much they know exactly who they are, or maybe it's just linked in that way. But anyway, I mean, you can see pictures of Lamastu online, or if that's how it's pronounced.
I mean, I'm guessing they went with the...
It's probably because they were going to do a trilogy, which questionable if they are. Apparently they are, but apparently David Gordon Green won't actually never plan to direct all three of the films, apparently. It might be because they're building towards Pazuzu as the big finale. That would have been there. Each one will have a different demon until they get to Pazuzu. Maybe that's why they were like, that's another way to hold it till later. Maybe that's why they're a bit tamer. They're not quite as dirty as Pazuzu. Yeah. Pazuzu got that pure filth mouth.
Yeah, Pazuzu's proper going for it.
Pazuzu's the sexually that because my words just went completely wrong there. The sexually inappropriate and foul-mouthed motherfucker.
Yeah, there you go. Well done, man. I mean, I'm just reading that in Sumerian mythology, Lamashtu was a female demon who harassed women during childbirth and attempted to steal their children. So,
because I believe Pazuzu is also based on an actual religious, not really, kind of mythological kind of creature. So I think they've just taken another one, but related it more to a different female or females.
Yeah.
Not that the original wasn't a female anyway, but
yeah.
But it's interesting that they've tried to change the lore a little bit there, so it's another one kind of thing. But I don't know if that was meant to be part of the biggest plan. We'll see if we ever get the rest of that. But the original, there's not really much else to say about the film itself. Regan's back to normal. She weirdly, we don't really know how much time's passed, but it's not that long after that they're moving out of the house.
No,
in fact, they're talking about investigation still as if it had only just happened, because the priest talks as if it's only just been like a day or two. But Regan's face already looks like it's got some bruising to it, but that's pretty much about it. She looks pretty fine.
She's
Even though
all right.
She had like more cuts and stuff, but it looks like she's way better. So I'm not sure exactly timeline there, but yeah, they leave, which I guess, yeah, you would.
Yeah, of course.
You don't want to be back in around that house just in case the house had something to do with it as well.
But it kind of
the
ends
detective
pretty
is
swiftly,
left.
doesn't it?
But
the detective is just like, well, I guess that's order.
Yeah. Oh, well, there's another dead person.
There's 2 dead people.
You do kind of question that a little bit, because they're like, well, first the girl was the only one in the house, now the girl's in the house, and the priest's gone out the window again.
Yeah.
And yet no one's like, kind of feels like this should have ended with Regan being taken away in anger.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how you did this. This girl has man strength, but...
Because they say that, yeah.
She has that special man strength.
She's got that special man strength.
I think we need to take her in for further questioning. I feel like there's an extra extended version of this where it's like, actually, wait a second.
Where she goes to prison for murder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Regan taken down, or Mum taken down for it, or maybe they just, because they blame it on Father Karras. Maybe that's the sad twist that we don't actually get to hear, is like, so Father Karras was the one doing all of the all of the killing and all the diddling.
Yeah.
Poor Father Karras.
But yeah, Rip King.
Rest in peace.
I mean, have you got any more additional comments?
No, I mean, there are more cursed things and things like that, but I feel like we've delved into a few of those. There are many more. If you want to find more about the killers, if you want to find more out about the curses, or you want to find more people that were born in Scranton, then feel free to go and delve deeper into it. But I think we've done our beliefs. We've spread, and we were compelled by this one.
I mean, it's a classic, and it's a great film. But I think it's one of those films where I'm probably not going to watch it again for some time, to be completely honest.
Yeah, it's definitely not one that it's not the one that I'd be like constantly like, I'm going to stick this on all the time, because it's just, with like slower build ones, it's not like my go-to as like a fun, like I'd watch this all the time.
Yeah.
But I'm not gonna lie, it's definitely one where I can appreciate how good it is.
Oh yeah.
I know that this is a classic of horror, and it's definitely one that there are certain films when you see people online turn around and say, "Oh, that was so slow, it was boring," or that film's just not scary, or have you watched it recently? It's not scary. I mean, I would say that actually, I think some parts of this are more shocking and more scary than a lot of horror films I see. I'm not saying that there's not plenty out there that have new ways of showing different grisly things and shocking, mainly more like what happens to bodies, or when it relates to things like mutilation or rape or like that kind of thing. It's still shocking, but in terms of like what's happening here, this is still just as shocking in ways than it was all the way back then. And it's still, I'd say there are still lots of horrors that come out nowadays that cannot match the intensity that this film has at parts, the shocking nature, just that general kind of atmosphere that this film contains. So I would definitely question people when they tell me that this is not a good film.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree, man. I think
it's like an untouchable, I think, and I understand that. And I expect to come back into this thinking, am I not going to like this as much as I did when I was younger?
Yeah.
And it's I found that with some horrors that I have revisited, but for me, no, this is one of those that it's like Psycho, it's like Exorcist, it's Halloween. There are ones that are just like, if someone says to me it's not good, I was like, I've got to just say it. I in many films I'd be like, it's your taste,
it's your opinion,
it's your opinion, it's thing. But I think there are certain parts of some films, just when you say it, and it's like like any other genre, like Godfather or whatever, you might say they're slow in certain things, you might say there are things you don't like about them, but to deny that they're a good film and that they're a well-made craft and that millions of films after them have not copied them and they made a whole genre of film.
Yeah, it's hard to argue.
It's hard not to say like, you're ignorant.
Yeah. Well, because I mean, apart from like, when you get rid of a lot of the, looking at the themes of the film and how the themes are kind of portrayed and interwoven, and a lot of the kind of scare and the atmosphere. If you look at it from like a technical standpoint and put together production values and that kind of stuff, it's a really strong film. Visually, it's beautiful. It's got a great like color palette going on. It's shot really well. It's got a lot of like foreshadowing and a lot of stuff kind of trickled in there. Like we do see shots of the stairs quite often, so you know that they're going to come back in.
Oh yeah.
It's like the acting, the writing's done well. People are delivering good performances.
Yeah, when you can delve into those films in the film, when you can make links, like you said, like the foreshadowing, but when you can make links about like the fact that you can see how, even in like the hospital scene, if you look into how much like William Fredrickson actually went into really finding out, and those scenes are uncomfortable because they feel very horribly real.
Yeah.
And even going into the fact that this film delves so much, and obviously a lot of this could come from the original book, William Blatty, I think it is, his books. But you know, even the way it delves into the religion and looking at it from a real kind of what it was like in the 70s or before the 70s, and the way that you can contrast that with what's happening, it all feels very well researched and thought into. It's not just you're thrown together like, I don't know, I haven't watched it. Someone said something about the Pope's Exorcist and said like it's like as if someone, they say that's based on real life, and lots of people I've heard say, well, if that's what really the life was like, then I don't believe any of that, because none of this felt like it was real at any point. It feels like you read something and just said, yeah, we can do that, but let's add more demons and let's make it, more, it's those kind of films nowadays where it does feel like they've rushed to make a film that was like that, and they haven't really researched, they haven't really tried to go any deeper than the context of it. It's a possession film, so we have some demons, someone's possessed, someone does some crazy shit, you know what I mean, we've got someone who wants to help them, we've got a parent who's saying, and basically they're using this film and being like, basically just do what the Exorcist did, but
with
add some more gore to it, because it's modern day,
get Russell Crowe
and like things like that, and then someone comes up to them and goes, okay, well, we can do it this way for CGI, which we'll be able to do, that'll only take us, a couple of months to get that done. Or we might have to add some extra time, but we can build this set, we can do it practically, but we're probably going to need like a good 6 months to a year to really make this good. Yeah, CGI, mate.
CGI, mate.
Just CGI instead. And, you can say whatever you can about CGI, but CGI-based stuff, and that was some of the little nitpicks we had with Believer, and I didn't think it was as noticeable as it was, but when it was occasionally like pure CGI, it just doesn't work as well.
It kind of gets red.
Horror should be as practical as it possibly can be. It's like, to be honest, any film could be. If you want to look at say Christopher Nolan's film, there's a reason that it has more CGI than he lies about, but but he also has a ton of practical, and it makes it feel grounded and real.
Yeah.
And horror, that's what it should feel. It should if you've got that grounded realism, it brings it close to home and it makes it scarier. When it's like fake blood, you can freaking tell, and it kind of takes you out of that moment. And that's what I mean. Whereas this really felt like it's happening. And it feels like it's happening to them, and even makes you test your belief with head twisting and stuff like that, and like, what the fuck's going on? And it just really grounds it. And I just think that we do have a sad, nowadays, a lot of them, we have a sad culture now, even with filmmaking, where the ones that have been really thought through, you can feel it. The ones that have just been like, oh, we're going to make that film, are we? Okay, you got 2 months to get that done. Write the script. You got a couple of weeks. Then we need to start making it, and that's what a lot of them are now. They're just like on the conveyor belt. You know what I mean? And there's no time to be like, let's really take our time to research and let's look into this. And that's why certain films are just superior, because you talk to the director and they can talk for hours about how this worked and how we wanted to bring this to life and things like that. And then if you see interviews with certain directors nowadays that have done certain films, they just don't have that same, like with certain films that I've seen interviews with horror directors. Some of them I can tell that they really knew their shit, and some of them are just like, we wanted to kind of make it scary, so we brought in a really good team of CGI guys.
Yeah, I also think whether it's an old thing or whether it's like the directors just knowing what they want to make with the film. Like if you look at William Friedkin who made it?
Yeah,
William Friedkin and John Carpenter, right? If you look at their interviews the past couple of years, like John Carpenter did one the other day where he was like, he said about a thing theory. He was like, nah, only I know what's going on. The like head of cinematography or the editor, nah, he doesn't know shit.
It was all my vision.
It's my vision. Yeah. I'm never going to tell anyone. And and William Friedkin was like, I don't give a fuck. They said something.
You can say your theories, but it's my vision. But that is the point. A great director is someone who has that pure vision, and sadly nowadays films are made by like committee.
Yeah.
You know, you make it one way, and then you've also got, and that's partially was in my head with Believer, is that I feel like as much as it is like part of it is David Gordon Green's vision, I couldn't help but feel like someone along the way went, nah, the studio's sending you these notes.
You got to do it.
You got to change these things.
Yeah.
Just, can you do that for us? We spent $400 million on this franchise.
Yeah.
You got to follow our notes if you want to make this film. Can you get rid of that bit about them doing that? We don't want that. Middle America doesn't like this. The Latino community will not respond well to that horrible reference that you've added in there. You know what I mean? Like any of those notes that you hear, and you hear about them all the time in the movie industry, where directors, after the film's been released, they're like, the studio were fucking dicks the whole time. They constantly were just nitpicking. They wanted to reshoot scenes.
Yeah.
They shot stuff without me, then sent it to the editor. The editor, you know, and you can even tell that with a relationship like that. Like, the editor had no relationship with me because basically I was locked out of the editing room.
Yeah.
And it's these horrible things you hear, and then you hear what the original film was, and you're like, that sounded way better with the director's vision, but no, we're just going to do it our way. And yeah, there are lots of directors out there that still get their vision and get to do it the way they want to, but sadly it's more and more common to have like, they wanted to make this film, they've hired a director, you made some short film, you make it, but we're in control.
Or the test screening, the audiences didn't like it, so we've got to reshoot it.
Exactly, yeah. They didn't like that the character died at the end, and then you watch the version where they've tacked on some happy, shitty ending, and it's like, this film would have been so badass if you just committed to the death.
Also, I just found out he died in August.
What, William Fred? Yeah, I heard about that. Actually,
Rick King, rest in power, King. But yeah, have you got any other comments?
I'm done.
Yeah,
I will now rest.
You will rest. Yeah. I mean, I think we've talked quite in depth about our thoughts on the film, some of the themes, some of the interesting tidbits that we've learnt. Both of our facts were equally as interesting as each other. But yeah, come and let us know your thoughts on The Exorcist by finding us on Twitter and Instagram at CMTH Podcast. Remember, the power of Christ compels you to hit that subscribe button and leave us a lovely review. If not, I'm just going to yeet myself out of the window. Take care, and we will see you next week. Bye bye.